So you said you had you were going to work on some questions.
Yeah, but let me get your introduction first. Hey there, and welcome to another episode of the More Than English podcast. I am excited about today because, for one, there's two different things that are going on. For one, the video format that's going on YouTube, and for two, we have our first returning guest, and I'm delighted to have Dr. Peter Crosthwaite here. If you're not familiar with Dr. Peter Crosthwaite, let me give you a brief summary of his credentials and see if I got this right. So, for one, don't try to spell his name without double checking it. But Dr. Peter Crosthwaite, he is a lecturer at the School of Languages and Culture at the University of Queensland, that is in Australia. He is a former assistant professor at the Center for Applied English Studies, that's easy for him to say, but not me, in the University of Hong Kong. He has his master's in TESOL from the University of London and his PhD in Applied Linguistics from the University of Cambridge. He's
a really cute guy as well, you know.
And he's what? Oh, we're getting there.
Just to top it off, right?
What's that?
Just to top it off, it's like not only does he have all that, but he's also a really cool guy as well.
And he loves pro wrestling too, and you can't top that. But we have some cherries on the top too. He's lived and taught English in South Korea, England, Hong Kong, Australia, and I may be missing some places. Where have you lectured?
I've done a few. I've done a lot of presentations in many different countries. Been to China a number of times, Philippines, Thailand, Malaysia. You name it, chances are there's been a talk there or a talk coming up in the near future. Indonesia is the next big place.
Especially in Asia. Your focus mostly is in Asia, correct?
Yeah, that's right. And that's simply like a question of numbers. There are just far more English learners in Asia than any other part of the world. So naturally, you go where the people, where the demand is.
That's it. And there's more. He was one of my first coworkers and the resident veteran in my first English teaching job.
Yeah,
and he's one hell of a guy too.
Yeah.
Some of his contributions, I was going to list actually your contributions and published work, like write them out until I saw that there are about 400 things here. So I couldn't write out all of these.
Fit on the PowerPoint. Sorry.
Just the Cliff's Notes, published work in 4 books, 1 chapter in a book, journal articles, published journal articles, conference papers, 26, and 2 theses. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And
his PhD.
Areas of expertise, which we're going to learn what these mean if you're unfamiliar, because I'm going to need some brushing up too, or I'm going to need some explanation. Corpus Linguistics. That's an area of expertise. The use of Corpora for language learning, and that's data-driven learning, and English for general and specific academic purposes. These are his areas of expertise. And we're going to find out what those mean today and how we can use those in the classroom.
Okay.
How'd I do?
That's you kind of captured most of it in a nutshell. That's something that has been building up over the last almost 15 years since we first met. We both started in the same place, you know, and I did well. I don't know what happened to you.
I'm still trying to figure it out.
Yeah, but that's it. I just ruined the whole.
And
podcast.
we also were talking before we went on the air that you're getting into Muay Thai, so you're a trained killer as well.
Well, yeah. It helps. Instead of taking it out on the children, you take it out on the punch bag instead.
That's much healthier.
If you have anger issues, right?
Yeah. No steel chairs in that though.
No, God, could you imagine? Off the top rope, at least. Yeah. Well, no. No, I think you pretty much got everything there, up to kind of current practice. And I guess the main thing to take away is just that I've been in a lot of different places, seen a lot of different things, and in terms of getting my view on how to approach these different topics for these different areas of English language learning is something that I do have a lot of experience with, and I think all of that experience combined just kind of gives me a different perspective on things. And I see a lot of people trying to do things and trying to repeat things and trying to do the same thing over and over again. But I think
that doesn't work.
There's a lot of things that people are doing that just don't work, and then people
For
come
example,
to me.
can you think of one example? Like the biggest example maybe that you see, and it's like kind of makes you, you're like, oh, what are you doing?
Okay, well,
like
I suppose
it would be like listen and repeat exercises be one.
Well, of course. I mean, this is something that, say, for example, people are heavily into these language learning apps at the moment. Apps like Duolingo, for example, still one of the most popular apps that are out there. Lots of other type of apps for children doing language learning, things like that. And a lot of these, the way that these apps work is still very much on that listen and repeat, listen and memorize type of instruction. And you're not really doing anything with the language at all. So that as soon as you pass the tests and you've earned the points and leveled up or whatever, you're getting these achievements, but the achievements don't really mean anything, because as soon as you put down the app and somebody says, okay, what did you learn? Chances are you're not going to be able to produce anything meaningful or anything beyond what you've memorized. So even though the technology is very new, the mode of instruction is still taking us back to like 60, 70 years ago. There's really nothing novel with it. So
it is kind of the same thing
points.
About as like when we used to buy CDs or language learning CDs or cassette tapes before that. It's just kind of like an updated form of that, right?
I mean, in a way, it's good that one thing that they do very well is that they bring people together. They motivate people to learn languages who probably wouldn't ordinarily have much motivation. The fact that you can do it anywhere, anytime is a really good factor, because a lot of people these days just don't feel that they don't have time to do very much at all. They go to work, they go home, they got families, or they got extra studies, and they got maybe half an hour in the day to learn language. So in that way, they are pretty convenient. But it's when you see the claims that these software providers make that you're going to learn English within or another language within 6 months is something that it's a little bit misleading, and people should be aware of that.
That's true. That's a good point. But like you said, they do have their benefit getting that like constant contact, that daily contact, and like you said, motivation. Are you familiar with Pimbleur? It was a big thing a few years ago.
No, I'm afraid not. What is that?
It's a kind of like listen and repeat, but with like regular conversation. It's mostly geared toward like traveling language, like where's the hotel, how do I order food, things like that. I did that for a while in the beginning of living here in Spain, and that helped me a lot. But I was also living here, so I had that contact, and I was able to practice what I learned.
I think as long as the goal is that kind of very basic survival English or survival Spanish or whatever it is, but very, very basic things like going to the restaurant or getting a train or something like that, these apps will help you with that. But as soon as you get into anything more involved in the form of even the most basic of conversations, then you're going to run into trouble.
Sure. Especially listening. Listening, I found with students is, they could read and study grammar, but listening to actual people talk, they get stumped up. I have a student who just asked me to teach her that is dealing with that.
It's a real cognitive process. It's a very complex task, and it depends what you're listening for. So a lot of people, when they think of listening, they're not thinking about listening to conversations, but they're thinking about listening tests. Listening tests ask you to do very specific things. So you'll listen to a passage, you're supposed to get a general idea about what happened, and then there may be some specific language points, or you might get those kind of true, false, not given type questions. And actually, that kind of listening is very difficult even for native speakers of the language. I mean, I have trouble getting those questions right if I listen to those kind of tests. So listening for tests and listening to conversation are two very different things. Listening to conversation, at a lower level, it's not really, I think what people get hung up on is that they come to a passage that they don't understand, or maybe there's a sentence where they're not sure about every single word in the sentence, and then at that point they've kind of reached the limit of what they can understand, and then the panic starts to set in, and then at that point you've lost them. So it's more about training people to not attempt to try to process and understand everything, but just try and get a general sense about what it is that's been said, because you can figure out what the message is without necessarily understanding what all the words are. And then there's a lot of negotiation for meaning that can happen during listening as well. If you're in an actual conversation with someone, and you want to express that you don't really understand what was said, I mean, there are all kinds of little cues that will go off between you as the listener and the person who's doing the speaking in actual conversation. If you can see each other, there'll be facial cues, there'll be hand signals, that just like that. And if you can't see each other, there'll be pauses, there'll be hesitations, there'll be things that are happening during that dialogue where it's signaling to somebody that they don't understand. I mean, even a pause of, like, say 3 seconds in response to a question in a normal conversation, that would be very unnatural. So then somebody will, at that point, if there is a pause, the other speaker will try and repair that, So one thing to do is to listen to actual conversations, people, because if you're just relying on like tape scripts and recorded audio that is written to be spoken, then what you don't get is that real kind of interaction of what happens in a real conversation, where people are trying their absolute best to get these messages across. And there's a number of strategies within that are very important that can be taught. These kind of conversational repair strategies, for example, that can be really useful for second language learners, even at a very low level, because they can employ these strategies then to repair the conversation and to keep things going. And part of that is listening as well as speaking.
Yeah, and asking questions.
Yeah, I mean, questions, it's also the kind of questions. I mean, a question can be like, or it can be, did you say, or could you repeat that? Or maybe you try to paraphrase the sentence that they just said, and then see if that makes sense when you play it back in a way. There's lots of different things that if you study lots of interaction between people, and have that in the form of a video with an accompanying script, and if the script has details that show some of the extra linguistic things that are going on, like the pauses or the gestures and things like that, by studying that very rich data, you can get an idea about what's actually happening when people communicate. And people know how to do this in their first language, but when it comes to the second language, they may not understand the different cues that, say, a native English speaker would use, or the different kind of repair strategies, because these things work differently across cultures.
Would having a script of a conversation or of a listening be valuable in a classroom, like for a class exercise, or is that a little too much?
It depends on the nature of the class. So if you're with a class of children, that would never work. Sure. If you're with a group of adults who are at a reasonably, say, intermediate level of proficiency, and they want to study some specific repair strategies or ways to keep the conversation going, then yeah, by all means, I think that would be a good idea. So actually, I mean, very often what happens is and this is one of the amusing things when you think about it, is that a lot of people end up going to English conversation classes, right? But all they do is they just talk during the class. And that's the conversation class. But what I try to do sometimes, and this is going back 10 years, even in my kind of last few years in Korea, I was trying to do this, is that we'd actually study a conversation.
How would you study a conversation?
Well, one of the things I did was I actually used Simpsons episodes. And I mean, these are not real conversations, but I would have the video and the script. And then I would play the video. I'd get people to go down the script and mark out things they weren't sure about. And then we try to give them some explanation. And then we try to get them to reconstruct that in their own words, if they weren't comfortable using the words from the script. So they figure out what the dialogue was actually about, what the different sides were trying to do in that dialogue, and try to reconstruct that themselves. So the language itself was treated more like an objective study, like we actually studied it instead of just chatting to each other. So when you think about a conversation class, sometimes the actual studying the language on paper it can be a useful exercise. I wouldn't recommend it for all types of learners, but certainly I find that you reach a stage, usually at intermediate level, where you've done pretty much all you can with your basic approach to language learning. But then to get to the advanced level, you need to actually study a little bit.
You need to put in some hard work there, right?
And it's not just a case of practice makes perfect, because you can practice for the rest of your life and never be perfect. Whether you ever want to be perfect or not is a story for another time. But then at least I find that sometimes you actually have to study the language, and if you want to learn how to have a conversation, study how to have a conversation, like study the strategies that are involved and the different processes that are involved in that. And a lot of that is culture specific, and a lot of it is language specific as well. And it's very useful to teach even lower level learners some of these strategies, so that they don't just freeze like a deer in headlights whenever they get into a conversation with a native speaker and the conversation suddenly goes on to something that they hadn't memorized. And
I might even argue it might be more important for lower level students to start, and for teachers of lower level classes to start having more genuine, authentic material practice in lower level classes, so they don't get these fossilized errors.
That's it. Yeah. So the deal with fossilization is that the fossilization can occur from a number of different things, but the most common form of fossilization is when somebody can actually get by using the language that they currently have, and the people who are around them kind of forgive them of that. So this is very, very common. It's the same.
That's me. That's my Spanish life.
I'm married to a Korean speaker. We have exactly the same problem in that there's some horrendous grammar coming out. But because I've been living with it for like 18 years now, then I know I understand perfectly what's being said. But then sometimes if we're out in public, I'm kind of like, that probably didn't make much sense to the person that you said.
And you're having your own pidgin language going on.
We still got some really good spoonerisms and things like that going on, so they're hilarious. But explicit correction is very rare. If you're in an English-speaking country, like I am here in Australia, it's almost impossible for people on the street to correct somebody else's English. Like, it's just not done.
For sure. It's not. People feel rude doing it, or
people would never think about doing it. So they get by and they manage the conversation in a way that, even though there's obvious advantage for the native speaker, but you can still have the conversation. Even people with very limited English, the conversation still happens. But if you're in an EFL country, chances are the person you're talking to also sucks. Right? So then you both suck equally, and then but that's somehow okay. In
By the
fact,
way,
it's kind of the opposite.
EFL country means English as a foreign language, as opposed to
Well, that's
English
it.
as their native language. In, like, for example, Chinese people speaking to Koreans in Korea
Yeah,
in
that's
English, right?
pretty much, that's like the worst definition I ever heard, actually. Yeah.
Really? Well, at
The
least I
real
got the
def the
prize for
real
being the worst.
Yeah, the real definition is where English is spoken as a foreign language, is not used as an official language.
Okay, well, that's pretty much what I said.
It, in a retarded way.
That's how I speak.
Yeah, so here in Australia, it would be English is what they call it. English is an additional language now.
Okay, is that the new term for it?
I don't know. They make up a different term every week.
So they can sell a new book.
Probably it. Yeah, it's a very PC thing. Yeah. But English is a second language. English is an additional language where we are. If you're in an EFL context like Spain, which is where you are, then you have actually a pretty decent general knowledge of English in the country at a basic level, just simply by proximity to Europe, and with the.
I would say it's more common in Korea.
Very, very similar culture. You really more in Korea?
Yeah.
Well, I guess.
Like if you're going out to shops, if you're going like just general tasks, and I think it's more that in Korea they're more willing because we do look different, and we're obviously foreigners, and so and the cultures are so different. So there's more of a willingness to help foreigners in English.
I think in
Spain,
right.
not so much.
Yeah. There's also more of a willingness to help foreigners who try to speak Korean badly, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So
you
I
say
think
감사합니다. Oh, you speak Korean so well. I should. I've been here 4 years.
That's it. Yeah, those are the only words I know. that and Mekju Hanbyong.
That's all you need. The essentials.
That's all I need. Yeah, the essentials. But
one of the things
I didn't know that about Spain.
One of the things
I've only
that we
ever
can.
been to the tourist trap. So
where did you go in Spain?
Oh, I've been to Barcelona. I've been to the Canary Islands as well.
Oh, nice. You didn't steal a taxi, did you?
I did not, but maybe I should have.
No, that was Darren Till did that like a few months ago. He went after.
Was it Darren Till? Was it?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was just like the done thing to do when you got there was to steal a taxi.
Darren Till stole a taxi.
Hey, did you steal the taxi?
Destroyed a hotel room.
Yeah, well, he's a Scouser, so what do you expect?
What do you expect? So going back to the authentic material, there's plenty of resources nowadays with like podcasts, for example. Like you pick a podcast, you can have genuine conversation and make a worksheet for it and take it to your classes. Yeah. Easy, right?
I mean, the technology now that we have, the connectivity. I mean, people even now in some of the most poorest areas of the world can still get online and access authentic materials. Where even 10 years ago, 15 years ago, the most access somebody would have had would be a textbook, maybe with a tape script in the back, with a CD which may or may not be missing, or a CD player which may or may not work. Right? I mean, we're still dealing now. I've got a PhD student from Vietnam who's basically saying, like, Vietnam is such a huge country now for EFL. It's like tipped to become the next China in terms of the numbers and the potential for it. But in terms of their access to materials is still very much like focused on textbooks. And that's as like the sole form of input for like a whole country full of learners. Indonesia also is very similar. There's places in this country that are like so remote, on border towns, places like that, maybe places that have only just got the internet. But like the difference that it's made to the outlook and of the people and the outlook of the learners, and then the kind of input and resources that they can get, is just unbelievable. I mean, it's not something you usually think about. Even in Korea, they've had that. It's a very huge technological country. I had the fastest broadband ever. I lived like in a rice paddy in the middle of nowhere the first year that I lived there. Right, I had like way faster broadband I ever had back home in Manchester, England. Right. But there's some of these places now that they finally got this broadband internet access, and the sky really is the limit when it comes to the resources. But the thing is that what's missing still is that the resources are there, but it's getting them to work in a way that actually contributes to language learning. So there's still very much a very passive approach to a lot of the materials that are out there. Your podcast, for example, is great because it's not just listen to me. You've got activities, you've got worksheets, things that consolidate all of the different language points that you're trying to make, the different grammar points, the vocabulary, the phrases. You're trying to put it all together into something meaningful. So the next step is to get is to work with the technology more to explore options for genuine collaboration and interaction. So by live casting and things like that now are really taking off. So instead of just downloading somebody's podcast, watching these things in real time and commenting in real time is something that has only kind of been popular within the last 5 years or so. But because we finally got the technology to do it. So turning that into a kind of teaching and learning area or habitat is what a lot of people are looking at the moment. And another thing is to generate materials that cater for different proficiency levels as well, is something that's also really taking off. And also technology and automated feedback and technology that allows for long form writing is particularly something that's quite interesting to me these days. Short private online courses, MOOCs, SPOCs, these kind of things, all these acronyms have come about in the last few years. And it really is amazing now what we have access to, but there's still a lot of it. It still takes a teacher to turn it into something that you can actually use for language learning. So
kind of to bring it alive, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's not like we're suddenly all out of a job. There's, it's not.
That's, I think, the fear that people have. But as long as you have people interaction, with people, you'll need people to be in there and to give motivation.
Yeah, I mean, the technology is nowhere near that. I mean, we saw, what was it, last year or something? They had that big advert come out for the Google headphones that could translate everything in real time. And then when people actually sat down and research what it could actually do, they found it was pretty horrendous still in terms of its ability to handle anything over set memorized phrases for that demonstration. And then as soon as you get into units above the clause level, so where you're starting to build complex sentences, and then these sentences lead into paragraphs that carry meaning, as soon as you get above the sentence level is where the translation software really starts to fall down. So say, for example, you're giving somebody very complex directions, the software might figure out the first sentence, but by the time you've got to the end of it, the software will have probably given you completely wrong directions to somewhere else.
I mean, look no further than Google Translator.
Yeah, I mean, it's really bad. I have a great example. I don't know if you can do like a screen share thing on this. I'll look into it in a moment. But I've got a great example on the academic writing course that I have.
I can share my screen, and you can share your screen too.
I think I can do it. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sign in here on the online writing course that I have. I think I can click it by doing this. Yeah, desktop maybe. I think. I would
like to pick your brain too. There you go. You're sharing.
But I can't see it. Oh, no, I can. Okay,
there you go.
You see that?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So I'm just logging in here into the online course that I run. I run 2 entirely self-constructed online courses for English for academic purposes at my university. This was all built kind of pretty much by hand. It's a 13-week course for academic credit. And one of the things that I look at on my module on Corpora, for example, is what dictionaries and translation websites can do, and most of all, what they can't do. So Google Translate comes up as one of the activities that I got here, in that I get students to type in a pretty standard phrase here in English for academic purposes, which is the data suggests that. Okay, so if you're doing any kind of research writing that involves data and you're presenting a graph or a table or some statistics or something, your paragraph is pretty much always going to start with the data suggests that. Now, when this is directly translated into Mandarin, we've got the expression here that you can see. But then straight away, when you copy this back into the translate window and translate this to English, it gives you a completely different expression. So this just shows you that, I mean, these guys have spent billions of dollars on this, but if it can't do something as simple as this, then it shows you just how far away we are from this translation software being any kind of use at all. As shown by data, A is grammatically incorrect, but also the data suggests there's a kind of hedging device where the writer is being careful not to make a claim that is easy to criticize. But as shown by data is a lot stronger in terms of the implication of the strength of the claim that the writer's trying to make. So not only is the grammar wrong, but the motivation behind this phrase has been
the communication. The communication is different.
So this is why you still need to talk to real people, or you're not going to be able to do very much. So yeah,
it's very limited.
I mean, it has a purpose. And right now, a lot of my job is one of my other jobs at the university is that of integrity officer. So I'm trying to use it to stop people cheating on their work, which takes up a lot of my time. Yeah,
to quote Joe Rogan, you can't stop the internet.
No. I think if you look at Dante's Inferno, I think people who commit fraud are somewhere down there near Satan. In terms of there's different circles of hell, right? And near the top, you've got the kind of people who lied a bit, and then you've got the murderers. And below the murderers, closer to Satan, are people who committed fraud. Dante saw fraud as like the most serious crime because it involves willfulness. If I had the book to hand, I'd show you the diagram. Maybe you could see it, but
you might know my son's name's Dante.
Well, that's a great name. It's a pretty cool name and a cool book. I read it recently. Dante's Inferno.
Nice.
I'll check it out.
I will. So I saw in there this Corpus Linguistics. So can you just give
now I've got my screen share thing. I can actually show you what
an explanation of that quickly, and how we can apply this in the classroom in our classes with students. How it will help become, help in our conversation classes.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I've been doing for a while now, and it's pretty much my main research area at the moment, is to look at alternatives to dictionaries and translation websites. And something that has been quite popular over the last 5 or 10 years is to use language corpora for this purpose as a language reference resource to replace dictionaries or translation websites. The reason for this is because...
Do you think it will?
I believe that it's still not in the mainstream yet, but it's something that once it builds up and once we actually have the better apps, more functional websites and more simpler user interfaces, then I believe we really will get there. So one of the things that if you don't understand what a corpus is basically a collection of texts, either written or spoken, and these can be in the millions, tens of millions, or even billions of words. And how these work for language learning and teaching is that, say, for example, you'll have an expression like the data suggests that, right? And you want to know what words could replace suggest in that expression. Then I could go to Corpus and I could enter the data and then put a little star where suggest is, and then that, and then the corpus would then provide me with many examples of different expressions that would replace the word suggest with lots of different options that I could use.
You mean in that specific context with the surrounding words? Because what's the difference between a corpus and a thesaurus, for example?
Well, let me, what all a thesaurus will do is it will give you similar words at the single word level. And these are linked by kind of conceptual categories like time, space, number, object, and things like that. And often these can also be slightly arbitrary as well. So what a corpus will do is it will give you the search results with enough surrounding context that you'll be able to figure out how the word is actually used rather than what the word means. And this is what we're trying to get away from when we're talking about getting away from dictionaries. Very often when a language learner uses the dictionary, it will give them a definition. And most cases, especially second language learners, the definition can be harder to understand than the actual word than you were looking for. So then you've got a real problem. So what Corpora do, and here is what I'm going to try and share the screen with you here to give you a couple of examples of how this works out. This is one of the easiest corpus interfaces out there. It's called the Skell platform. If you just Google Skell, Skell, it stands for Sketch Engine for Language Learning, and it just pops up like this. So something that I do with my students right off the bat, say for example, I want to know what words go together with the word research. I want to know how the word research is used in context. So what I'm going to do here is click in research into the website, and it gives me 40 expressions taken from lots of different kind of genres or disciplinary areas about how the word research is used. Not only that, but it gives me different variations of research as well. For example, researching, researched, and so on. And I can search for it whether it's a noun or a verb. So what I can do is I can spend time reading the different examples, or you can start to get more complex and try different functions such as the word sketch function here. So what this is, it's a very basic, it provides me with some basic search results based on the corpus data that these are computational processes that will then use frequency and other measures that tell us which words go together and which words don't go together with other words.
Which is an important thing to mention to your students is like that words, like oftentimes a word doesn't just sit by itself, right? There's usually prepositions that go along with it, or
that's it. So one of the biggest problems, for example, that second language learners have in English is that of phrasal verbs, right? They're one of our most difficult, kind of impossible things to get right because the rules that make these things up is pretty much completely arbitrary. The rules are actually, there is no such thing as grammatical rules, to be honest. In fact, what grammatical rules are merely statistical frequency effects of actual language in use. And the difference between native speakers and second language learners is native speakers have already internalized all of these statistics as a result of being exposed to millions, if not billions of words throughout their lifetime. Second language learners don't have access to this kind of resource. So what a corpus does is it gives you the access to those millions and billions of words that you can query so that you can see how these words go together and how they're used in different phrases. And that it's kind of in the same way that a native speaker would think of these expressions. So it's speeding up the process greatly for making associations between words, looking at different grammatical patterns and so on. So what you can see here on the screen with research, for example, is I want to know what verbs can go together with research as a subject here, right? So I can have the research suggests, research shows, research indicates, research reveals, and so on. So if you looked in a thesaurus, as you asked me before, for words like reveal, you might get these examples. But here I know that these examples are specific to research. So then if I click on any one of these, I can get examples of the word research together with suggests. You can see here the color-coded results. Research plus suggest here. And I can see that
there's
for
a
the
ton
most
of
part,
examples.
a ton of examples. I've got here research suggests. What does research suggest? It suggests the social component of ritual. It suggests cosmic dust might have skewed the results. So I'd like to see what paper that came from. It sounds pretty out there. It's like a Joe Rogan type.
Right.
Yeah, Jamie, pull that up. Pull that shit up. Cosmic dust.
Jamie, pull up that cosmic dust.
Yeah, here's one for you. Bipolar 1 disorder runs in families.
There you go.
Yeah, that's for you.
That is me. No, it isn't. What are you talking about?
Yeah, that's it. Research suggests all mammals experience REM, and so on. So, I mean, that's just one example. Then if I want to go and try indicate, I can click on that. And then it'll give me all of the different examples for research. Indicate, so research indicates the truth behind the observation. Research indicates cholesterol may act as an antioxidant, whatever. So then I could look up verbs where I can have the verb and then research as the object. So in this case, I've got conduct research, undertake research, publish research, and so on. And then I can look at different modifiers, adjective modifiers or modifiers of research. So here's scientific research. I can pull up all of these different examples. So it's what I'm doing here is in doing this, I'm able to query so many different things about this one word that I've encountered. And from there, I can start my investigations. Okay, like what words go together with this word? How is this word used in real expressions and things like that?
So this resource would be kind of more useful for people teaching more serious students who really want to know the stuff, who have maybe they're going to university abroad, they're studying in-depth English, right?
Yeah, I mean, so far that is where most of the research has been done on academic English for academic purposes, for example. But increasingly, as this starts to replace people's approach to, say, dictionaries or translation websites, eventually what is happening is I've got a new book coming out this month, or certainly by next month, where we've gone ahead and used this software with young children. Children still in primary school level or in high school, and they've gone ahead and begun to use this. And I mean, I feel like old these days when it comes to technology. Like my youngmies just set up Snapchat. I don't know how it works. I don't have a Snapchat. I don't want a Snapchat, right? And then like we had to go with TikTok the other day. I don't even know what that is. That's just like the most stupid thing I've ever seen, right? But
that's just like an ad that comes up on my Instagram every once in a while. Yeah, that's all I know about TikTok.
I am way behind on this. But when we let these kids use this software, I mean, they just took to it. It was like just so natural for them. They just went, "Wow, I didn't know we had this before, and now I can find out about any word I want." And these were
how old
primary
were these
school kids? These were 10 or 11-year-old kids. They were not in high school yet. They were in the upper grades of primary school, and they were learning like essay writing for homework with a private tutor. And we got the private tutor to train them on this software for like just 5 minutes at the beginning of their regular lessons.
In the Skell?
In the Skell. We also trained them on another one as well, where it's slightly more complicated. And they just went wild for it. And now we're told that they're continuing to use it throughout. And then all of the other studies in this book that are coming out as well kind of say the same thing.
What would be some like a classroom idea that teachers could use to use something like Skell in an activity in a class, something that's engaging in an activity? Do you have anything like that?
Say for example that in your writing classes have a lot of these old-fashioned gap fill exercises that show up in your textbooks, right? And you got to fill in the answer, and then when you filled in the answer, that's it. It's a done deal. You never have to go back to that textbook again. you never have to go back to that exercise again. I mean, well done, you got the question right, but what did you actually win? You don't win anything by doing these things. So what you could do is to replace that by getting students to search for the blank within the corpus and then seeing what's coming up. So, for example, I think I'm still doing the screen share here where I've put in search for the data, and I've added in a wildcard here, which is .star in Skell. And what it's doing here is it's filling in the blank for me with different variations of words that could come in where that blank is. So I've got here the data showed that, the data suggests that. Other ones like here, the data type, the data transfers, the data indicated. So here, I can take your basic gap fill activity and turn it into something much more interactive, where students are going ahead and to search for things on their own. The crucial point that we try to do with this approach is to provide students with the autonomy to look for things themselves. So they're not relying on the teacher for finding out what word to use or what are the different variations of this phrase that they can use. Rather, what the teacher is doing is training students to find the information for themselves so that they become more autonomous, which is should be the goal of pretty much any language teacher. It kind of puts you out of a job, but what you really want is someone who can actually find out answers for themselves. And that's what this approach tries to do.
I kind of say that. I say, like, as a teacher, I am pretty much trying to work myself out of a job, essentially.
Yeah. I've just made 2 online courses, which at my last job would have had 30 different teachers teaching it face to face. Now I have 2 teachers who do optional face to face. Now the face to face has become optional. The online components become compulsory because in the end, this class is going to have 500 students on it. I can't possibly meet them all, can't possibly give them the face time they need. So taking it online is the only way to do it. It's the same thing that you're doing with your business.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of just changing the dynamic, like the invention of cars it kills the wagon industry, but it creates a whole new industry of mechanics.
Right? Yeah, it's not a really bad analogy. And it's like 2
Look at you killing all of my analogies and examples. And
I didn't understand what's he going on about the wagon? Such a Yank, such an American. Yeah.
I can't
take
help
a bull
it.
by the horn to get her done. Right. Take
a bull by the horn. That's right. Hey, can we try this? I pulled up an exercise on. You have a little guest. I've got
a little guest. Come over here. Just say hi.
Look
at the camera.
Where
Show
are
how big
we?
you are now. You're a big girl now. Stand up.
Is that Aaron? Hey, Aaron. Little taekwondo girl.
Yeah, we've seen your taekwondo. How good it is. And you're going to be 8 in November, aren't you? Yeah.
What belt are you?
What belt are you now? She's green belt with blue tips.
Aha.
So that means the next level up is blue belt.
Is blue belt.
So racing through.
Nice.
Racing through, aren't you? Yeah.
A whole trained killer family.
That's it. Well, I'm going to continue this chat so you can sit down there and play, or I'm talking to my friend. See you later. Close the door, please.
I won't keep you that much longer.
No, that's cool.
Let's practice this. I just pulled up a gap fill exercise, but this is grammar gap fill, so it's on conditionals. Would it be better that I find a
No. I mean, let's see what it is that you've got, and we'll see if we can do something to.
They're very simple verbs, and
okay. If I something go out tonight. All right. So what we could do here is we could maybe use a wildcard, for example, and replace go with the wildcard, and then we can then see different variations that might fill that slot. So
should I open up another tab with what's it called?
The scale. So it's just type in SKELL into Google, and it'll be the first thing that pops up.
Okay. So you can
That's the
kind of walk me through doing this.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what was the clue again? If you go back to the exercise, if I something go out tonight. So go into scale and type in if I, and then have a dot star.
A dot star?
Yep.
Like this?
Yep. And then another space, and then try out. We won't put tonight because it may not give us any results. The longer the string you have, the less chance you might get results in it.
Sure, that makes
sense. So
sense.
let's see what, usually when you put in a wildcard, it may take a little bit of time with Skell to find examples. And sometimes if you do have a phrase that is not, okay, there we go. So we do have at least a couple of examples.
Okay. What if I run? Oh,
so
wow.
we've got
okay.
If I go out, but these are different expressions here. If I find out anything, if I get out in, if I'm out of town, if I find out, if I come out, for example. So we're
so
getting
this is just looking at different phrasal verbs without. In
this case, yeah. So
yeah,
that's what it's got.
Okay. So let's try gap fill vocabulary exercises.
Mm-hmm.
So we have the first sentence.
What is that?
I will. Come and sit over here.
My birthday is beep November 20. Well, that's a different kind of vocabulary.
Yeah, but I mean, you could still find out what the answer is here.
Okay.
Most likely, if the corpus is big enough, like if, for example, if you've got their school starts and then you put in school starts dot star, you would find out what the answer would be.
Okay. School starts. So yeah, the way to search it is dot star.
Yeah. Well, that's where you got that's where the gap would be. Okay. You may want to click on the main thing because it's going to keep doing that search. So if you click here where it says Skell in the top corner there, it'll take you back to the main menu.
Go back.
And now you can search for the thing. So type in school starts and then a space with dot star. Press the
and then should I put in the time?
No. If you put in the time, it's going to be maybe too specific, and then it won't find what it is that you're looking for. So we got here school starts, but you can see here it hasn't found. Oh, because you haven't put the star. So what it's found is school starts with the full stop there.
Okay.
That should do it.
So that's like at the end of the sentence.
Yeah. So you may need to go back again to the main menu. Okay. No, it's going to keep doing that loop where it's searching. So school starts dot star.
Let's try that.
And then that should.
It's taking away that star.
All right. It's been a little bit weird. So there's no answer here that it's given yet. So that one might be a bit of an odd case.
That might be an odd case.
Yeah. But something else we could try, for example, is the Skell one is pretty good, but there's also lots of other platforms. For example, the Sketch Engine open platform is pretty good. This is one that I'm using in my work at the moment. I'm just going to share the screen with you here.
Okay. I'm searching it too. But yeah, we can check it out.
So what I'm going to do is this is the website here, the Sketch Engine website, and I'm going to click on Open Corpora to get into the free version of this.
That's always good.
So here there's an academic corpus, an academic written corpus, academic spoken corpus, and as well as a general corpus as well.
So this is, I think this is very new technology. So once we get the bugs out and things like that, I think it could be a very rich tool.
So this is the thing. I mean, at
to
the
learn how
moment,
language works within a sentence.
That's it. The data is there and the software is there, but at the moment, the one thing that's missing is still that nice user interface to make it all work. So it's like the difference between, like, back before we had smartphones, basically. Like, you remember you used to have the phone, like the Matrix phone that, like, did the flip, like a green screen, things like that. And then one day, the iPhone came out, and it's like everything changed overnight,
just changed,
right?
yeah.
So we're still waiting for that killer app that's gonna turn this into something that everyone uses. But so far, I mean, I've done studies now with over like 500 participants all using this, and pretty much everyone is positive about it. And met so many people, as soon as they get started using it, they just never go back to their dictionaries or translation websites anymore,
including word reference. Word reference is powerful. They'll need a big marketing team, I think.
Yeah,
the
sure.
Corpora websites.
So I'm having problems with my Australian internet here, which is famous for being really bad.
Certainly no Korea, is it?
Yeah, no, it's really hit or miss. So may have to leave this one for another day.
We'll save that for another day, and we'll make a separate video for specifically dedicated. You can stop sharing your screen.
Yeah. That's
so we'll make a separate video one day, specifically, preparing things for the Corpora and deciding how we can, and seeing how we can use these in the classrooms.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. It's I can put something together. No problem.
Okay, perfect. Just one other thing before we leave. Do you have any other kinds of activities based on your data that we can kind of use in our classes for writing, for example, or speaking conversation? Any kinds of activities that you think that are kind of your go-to activities? I know it's been a while since you've taught in the ESL classroom, but brush something
I guess something that I'm doing a lot at the moment in terms of writing, for example, is I'm using other kinds of technology now to get students to annotate text for genre features, for example. So
annotate text for genre features.
Yeah. So
what does that mean?
one of the things that I find students lack knowledge of generally is different genres of writing. So very often at university, for example, we get the vast majority of students who come in, they've done their high school writing, if at all. Because you have to remember, in many countries, they don't actually write anything in the writing classroom. I mean, in Korea, when we were there, and it's the same in China, same in Japan as well, you ask them, they're not actually when they have the writing classes, they don't actually write anything. All they do is they write to pass exams. And this very often doesn't include any kind of long form writing at all. So when I lived in Hong Kong, they actually had to do writing, like long form writing, as part of the high school test. So the students there were generally much better. But when the students arrived at university, what was happening is that they were not able to go outside of the English for academic purposes lessons and take part in their disciplinary lessons, like their subjects, their majors, for example, because they weren't aware of the different kind of genres that are used in those different disciplines. And across different disciplines, say the arts and humanities, the social sciences, physical sciences, life sciences, there's lots of different kinds of writing that take place throughout the university. But the vast majority of second language English students have only ever written essays before. As soon as they see something that's not an essay, they have no idea how to write it at all. They don't know where to begin. They don't know how it's structured. They don't understand the language features or anything related to that.
Like articles, letters, emails, things like that.
I mean, those are some of the more basic ones, but at the university level, students are asked to do quite a lot of different types of more advanced writing. So, for example, if you're in the sciences, one of the things that you're asked to do very frequently is something called a methodology recount, where you do an experiment and then you have to write up that experiment in terms of describing very carefully what it is that you did. And that can be very difficult if you've never done one before. So what I try to do in my English for academic purposes classes is to train students in how to recognize that a given text is from a particular genre, to look at the different language features that make up that genre, and to look at what the writer is trying to do. And then hopefully from then they figure out how to structure and put together one of these things by themselves. So one of the things I can show you here on this screen is a little bit of a description here about, say, the methodology recount. And at the moment, my students are going to do this next week. So what they're going to do is, I've got here an example text, which is built into some special software that we use at the university. And what this does is, I've got one of these methodology recount texts here, and then I give some guiding questions to students that they will answer. So the first thing they're going to do is try and skim read over this. I don't expect them to understand it in any way. The chances are they're not going to do that. But what I want them to understand is how it's constructed. So I'll ask a question like here, for example, how do you know this is a methodology recount from the introduction? Annotate any sections of text from the introduction that signal what genre this is. Question B, how and where does the writer describe what was done and explain the findings? How does the writer recognize the limitations of the procedure? How and where does the writer make suggestions about best practice? So then what the students will do is they'll find these things in the text, highlight it, and then they'll type in their explanation here for what they found. So they say, this is a description of the general process, and then they might talk about some of the different constructions that are present in here. So something is produced by, and then so that kind of expression might be particularly common in this kind of genre. Then they'll click OK, and then it'll show up. And
this is in your writing course.
Done this, it's in the writing course, yeah. So when students have done this, I can see all of their different answers, and then I can comment on what they got right or what they didn't do so well. So this week, for example, they've been doing ones on the something called the critique, and here they gave a critique on philosophy of all things. And I can see here all of the students' responses over the week. When my internet starts to work, and these are the different areas that the students have highlighted. So
we could do something like this in our classes, just with paper and different colored pencils or pens.
We could do it paper or color, different colored pens, but I find that what we've got here is our own like specific thing that was made by a university. But before we had this, everything I was doing was on Google Drive. So I was opening up a Google Doc and asking students to do the same thing, and giving students a shareable link with which they could then go ahead and do the task. So I've got a ton of these
classrooms for this too.
You can do Google Classrooms. Google Classroom, what that does, what you're looking at here is Blackboard, which is where the different things are stored. Google Classroom is basically a replacement for that, should you need one. So I've got here, for example, a link to a Google Doc. I've set up the instructions for the students here, and then I've shared the link and given the link to all of the students. So then what they do is they can go ahead and read this and try to work out, this task is they've got an essay which is not particularly very good. So then they go ahead and read it and try and work out why it wasn't good. And then they can post comments using the comments function to tell me, why it was bad. So this works similarly.
That's a great idea to do for your one-on-one classes.
So any kind of long form writing task this stuff is absolutely perfect, because if you've got it open and the students got it open, you can see what the student's doing in real time, and then you can provide feedback on their work almost as they're writing it.
Oh yeah.
You can highlight things that they were doing well, or you can put an indirect comment and say, have you thought about this, or is this structured correctly, or maybe there's more information you need here. What you can do with this stuff is really, really very useful. So I got a ton of these exercises all kind of built up on here that students can see and do. This is one for systemic functional linguistics, for example. So they get different kinds of text, and they have to annotate these texts for different kind of features, trying to figure out what the text's about and what the different language features are. So one is a children's story. The other is an interview between an applicant and a human resources manager. The first one's a film script. You just have these fixed on Google Drive, give the links to the students, and then you can continue reuse these exercises as many times as you want.
Google Drives is a great resource for one-on-one online classes. I use those all the time, and this is a great addition that I'm going to do in my next time we do reading, especially or practice writing, is labeling, highlighting, using the suggestions feature and highlighting different parts and labeling what it is.
It really makes reading tasks that much more interactive because of the different functionality students can highlight. They can leave comments. You can leave comments on the writing that they're doing. You can comment on their comments. And then it's all there as a record of like a permanent record of say what the student's done. And you can start charting students' development over time, for example. You can span this out over multiple drafts of work. So much you can do.
Perfect. Well, you can stop sharing your screen.
I don't know what she's doing.
I don't know. She's looking through your material. Look at that.
You're looking at my book, right? Studying IELTS. Yeah, all right. You do that.
You got to prepare for that.
Yes, you got to prepare now. Start them young.
That's it.
Start them young.
You got to prepare. Those IELTS aren't getting any simpler.
That's it. No, it's it. You'll be doing the listening test pretty soon.
and failing at it like all of us native speakers.
I'm so bad at it. Once Cambridge
with the IELTS, you can only listen once, right?
You can, yeah. As far as I know, I remember Cambridge once asked me to write listening items for the test, and it was just so hard. I could not do it. All the different things you have to remember, like writing the questions is so hard. Like getting the distractor question, for example. It's really hard.
Because it's got to be close, and it seems almost unethical in a way.
Yeah, it's close, but it's not quite right.
Yeah.
But that's really hard to do. Really very hard to do. So I couldn't do it. I can write the speaking and writing stuff all day long, but listening and reading is like a whole other beast. They have like very weird people who work for them who can do that. I'm not one of them. Yeah.
No, that's another level. Let me share it. I took some notes during our speech, so I'm going to share those, or during our conversation. So here we go. So obviously listening for exams is different than listening in conversation. That's an important thing to know for your classes and for your, these Cambridge listening, and identify the right speaker and that's not real. That's not real.
It's not real. So, but what you'll get is you get students who come up to you and they say, "Jesse, teacher, how can I improve my listening?" And what you need to ask is, okay, but what are you listening for? Are you listening for a test, or do you want to learn how to actually listen to conversation? Because
that's true. And do you just want to listen to videos, YouTube videos or movies, or do you want to have actual conversation?
The approach that you're going to take is going to be completely different depending on what the answer to that question is. So,
and that's something good for teachers to remember. Like, ask that question. Why do you want to? What listening do you want? What do you want to listen? But
I mean,
speaking too.
You should do that for anything. For writing, absolutely, got to do it. Speaking as well. People often say, how do I learn writing? How do I get better at writing? My first question is, what
What do you want to write?
What
a
kind
Facebook
of writing
post?
do you want to write?
Right.
You know,
and authentic
even
material.
Authentic material.
Authentic.
So, and again, this is something that the Corpus software does. In that the Corpus software, the data itself is taken from naturally occurring language in real text. So it's one of the whole selling points behind that approach is that instead of being like a dictionary definition or a textbook example that's been simplified in some way, for example, it's authentic real text. So you're getting the real English from it. But in terms of listening as well, real conversations that contain these different stages of the conversation, they contain strategies for repairing conversations, keeping conversations going when the other person isn't sure,
follow-up questions,
these kind of things. How to repair something when the other speaker isn't making any sense, for example. I mean,
for example, when they give
you're not making any
bad
sense.
Examples and illustrations of things, how do you handle that? How do you handle that? You just
the strategies to ridicule the guy who made them.
Until they stop. And another, but no, authentic material for conversation podcasts are great, like Joe Rogan's podcast, if you're into anything like that. Neil deGrasse Tyson has an excellent podcast if your students are into technology. Yeah. And use technology for you.
That these should be podcasts, though, that it's very easy to get overwhelmed by the complexities of the language. So there should be a greater emphasis on podcasts where the language is appropriate for the level of the student. That's not always easy to get because it's very easy to just throw yourself in on a podcast that is way above your level, and you can listen to that for the rest of your life and you're still not going to get it. So
I don't know. I kind of think
try to be selective over the podcast that you do tune into.
I think what would be more, I mean, you tell me what you think, but I think a more important thing is a podcast of content that is interesting to the listener.
Of course, yeah.
Because
there's so many different pieces of the puzzle that have to be right. So I'm just talking purely about the language aspect of it. You can have something that's very straightforward and easy to listen to, but if it's not going to grab your attention,
right.
You're not going to sit there and listen to it, of course.
And the length. I think size does matter in some things. And I think like
you wouldn't know about that.
No, I wouldn't know at all. and short pieces, like YouTube's great for that. They take short 5-minute segments, and those are great to listen to.
They do. I mean, we even had when we were making the videos for my online writing course, for example, the rule was nothing more than 3 minutes.
Yeah, that's
nothing
great.
more than 3, because anything longer than that, it just becomes an exercise. So
yeah. So use technology for you, like podcasts, like these Corpus website, Corpus programs, so like any technology, like it's here. Use it in the classroom for us. And check out these Corpus like skill to get a deeper understanding of the language. We will have, I will invite Peter, and I'll invite you right now for a future like video apart from the podcast, so we can prepare and look more in depth to Skell.
Put something together with Skell and with Sketch Engine Open as well. We'll show you some of the tricks that you can use to answer some of the questions that you might have about language.
Yeah, and I love how it looks deeper at not just a word, but the word surrounding a word. Which is so important.
I mean, this is something that the dictionary cannot give you. It's something that the translation website cannot do for you. So you're replacing your go-to resources like your translation websites, and you're replacing it with something better.
And that's the thing. Some other things to remind your students that we use the word rules. I hate the word rules with grammar too, because there's always an exception, and then students will call you, but you told me this rule. Well, there are no rules. Teachers, get the word rules out of your vocabulary with students.
That's right. I mean, the frequency is based on use over time. There's a lot of research that shows, for example, you get a lot of words that stop being used over time, right? And you also get words that start being used over time. So one of my favorite ones, for example,
like Google, for example.
yeah, well, Google's an obvious one. I'm going to use a little share screen again thing with you very quickly here. This is something called the Google Ngram Viewer, which again works. It's like a corpus of Google books. So one thing that I see changing over time over the last kind of 200 years is a drop in the use of the word shall.
Yeah.
So from the 1800s, shall was reasonably frequent in the corpus here. And then you see its use has continuously dropped over time. So this the same, you can get this for vocabulary. It's also the same for grammatical rules as well. I'm reading a book to my daughter at the moment. It's written by Enid Blyton. I think it's called The Naughtiest Girl in the School. But lots of people know Enid Blyton's stories. They're pretty famous around the world. That's fine. Yeah. Okay. But what's interrupt me? Very soon. Very soon.
That's right. Last time Sophia was in here interrupting.
I know. That's it.
Takes one to give one.
There's two dads, right? What can you do?
There you go. What can you do?
It's not like that BBC guy where the kid comes kind of rolling in like this. Remember that? And then the mum tries to like. Still makes me laugh when I see that.
Me too.
Yeah. Now, but I was saying, these rules are not set in stone. They change constantly, and there are even grammatical constructions. Like in this story that I was reading, like we wouldn't say that today. It's so out of date, and it's just and a lot of that. The usage is contained everywhere around you, the language that you're exposed to, and it's the frequency of the times that you're exposed to these things that is making the language that everybody speaks today.
Yeah,
that's the point you're trying to make there in your slide, and that's what I was trying to get at before.
Yeah, I mean these notes are based on what you've talked about, so that's good.
So that's lucky then, isn't it?
Yeah,
we didn't just make them up.
No. And so, but teachers, it'll save you a lot of headache to get the word rules out of your vocabulary, especially when a student tries to catch you and they say, but you said this.
You said the rule. Yeah, that's it. And it's like, there are no rules.
There are no
so,
rules. It's
like
the
no holds
Rumble.
barred.
And children are gonna be. I know it was a little.
We could make extreme
glitchy
rules
today. We are gonna make extreme rules. Extreme rules for your English classes.
Okay. Yeah.
And it was a little glitchy today, but we're gonna have this under control. And Peter has assured us that children are able to use the corpus, and it's very intuitive, and it's only getting better as anything with technology.
That's it. So one thing we're going to do very soon is we're going to try to take this to teacher training schools in Indonesia and Korea, train the teachers in the use of this, and then we're going to go off and let the teachers go into the schools and see what happens. It's going to be a really cool experiment that's coming up next year.
Awesome. And as far as teaching writing is a difficult thing to teach. And I don't think a lot of people are trained, as Peter said, like they're not trained in teaching writing. We don't know how to teach writing. And one thing that you can do is, like Peter said, if you have to go back and listen or watch that part again, train students to identify genres of writing and then kind of reverse. Let me know if I'm butchering this explanation of it too, and then reverse engineer the parts of what they studied, what this in the students' writing.
That's perfect. Yeah, and that's a pretty good way to describe it. But then you're going to have to explain reverse engineer to the learners. So. But then that's where the corpus comes in useful, because you can type in reverse engineer and give yourself 40 examples of what that means.
There you go.
What it means, right? There you go.
It's like a lesson within a lesson.
It's very meta right now.
And what's perfect, I use it all the time for my one-on-one classes, and also in some classroom classes, Google Docs, to identify and do this work together.
I mean, it's just that's really a no-brainer.
That's a no-brainer.
It's a no-brainer. So it's great for your one-on-one classes.
There it is. There's not one brain in the lesson.
That's it. Don't speak for yourself.
And I am.
Your students may be very smart. I don't know. You don't want to disparage your own students.
No, that's true. It was more a commentary of myself.
Okay. Yeah, good.
Okay.
No, Google Docs, I mean, it's just such a lifesaver, especially if you're in any kind of situation where you're in a class, you've got 50 students, you can't possibly hope to get around them all in an hour. So you get them writing using the Google Docs. You can see them doing collaborative writing tasks, for example. So you put 5 kids in group A, 5 kids in group B, separate templates for each of the group. Then the kids are working on their own template, and then you can see them updating it in real time. You can also see that one group who's not doing anything, so then you can throw something at their table, or you give them an elbow drop or something, and the leg drop.
Give them an angle slam.
Put them through the table. Right.
Tell Devon to go get the table.
Yeah, that's it. So there is that.
No, that's a great use. I'm actually going to do that. Yeah, have Google Docs for like that. Small groups.
One of my favorite activities that I show in my second language writing lessons is you can also do this with PowerPoints as well, where you can group edit PowerPoints. And I have like a Wikipedia template as a PowerPoint. And then I get 6 different groups, and they're each given a separate topic to write about. So it's about our master's program. So one will do like extracurricular activities. One will do one about the professors. One will do one about the lessons, for example. So they all do their separate pages, but then they all link to each other's pages as well. So by the end of it, we've got like a complete mini Wikipedia that is about our program that the students have written by themselves, and then they've collaborated within their groups to do these things. Then they also collaborate with the other groups to figure out what they were doing, and it just leads to a really useful whole class activity that couldn't have been done without the technology.
Yeah, your students seem a lot more motivated than most of my students here.
I wouldn't say that. No. I wouldn't say that, but it's the fact that they'll be put in a situation where they do not have to sit and listen to me for 2 hours straight. Yeah. Nobody wants that, least of all me. So I'll be talking maybe 15 minutes at the beginning, and then it's all on them from that point on.
Very nice. That's awesome.
And that's what you want.
Yeah,
so I basically
that's learning.
Back, check my stock on the phone. See how much money I'm making today. And
we're losing.
Student asked me a question. I'm like, hey, I'm checking my stock. What do you want? Get on with the task, So
get to your work. Okay.
Yeah, well, the evals are still good, so whatever.
That's the important thing, right?
That's it, right? Yeah.
Well, thank you for doing this. Thank you. I've taken way more of your time than I'd planned to, but it was all rich content. So thank you for that.
No worries. I will set up that other date later.
Totally. Definitely. Because I do want to find more about the corpus. Very good. Okay. Well, let me know how it goes. See how many viewers you get. Anything more than the usual 2 or 3. Then double would be awesome. Let's get into the double digits. Okay. All right. Cool. Anything you want to say before we leave? Not right now, man. So I'm going to put these kids to bed, actually. Okay, sounds good. All right. Thanks, Peter. Yeah, no worries. Have a good one. Bye. See ya.